abroad. But this goes a bit beyond that. We're talking about a country that's being used quite well by another country throughout the revolutionary period, where they have been seen as an enemy of all the Western states, and also the Gulf states as well. China has been the main target since at least the mid-72nd, and again, this information is through third parties, so I can't give you any direct first-hand evidence of this, but it's always been China. It was always China that is to be the big one in this timeline. B. MMHM. W. It's China that they're after right now, and it's all about how to coerce and create the scenario where this type of, well, it's going to be war, Bill. There's going to be a war, how this can be realized and how it can be made credible to everybody here living in the West. And the way it's going to be made credible is by a state like Iran being used as a patsy to use a nuclear weapon in order to elicit an exchange. B. And the whole justification of this, then, is to provide or to trick China into a war. With what reason? W. China will then come to the aid of Iran, very quickly. And what we're talking about is these roads to Jerusalem, as it were. And it should be no surprise that the Chinese have got their own road to Jerusalem, so to speak, because that's where the oil is the lifeline, and that's where their power could be extended far more than where it is at the moment. B. I didn't understand what you meant there by Jerusalem. Was that a metaphor, talking about Iran? W. Yes. It was my metaphor. Although I haven't mentioned it to you previously, you know, they talk about the road to Jerusalem, as it were. People like Benjamin Netanyahu use it quite a lot. Obama has used it. The Chinese president has actually used it, I believe, too. Hu Jintao, his name is. They've actually used this metaphor. B. I didn't know that. W. Yes, they have. It's where that road lies. Does it lie through Tehran, going one way? Or does it lie through Tehran again, coming the other way? B. Okay, so you're using it basically as a metaphor for a desired goal, something that's reached and attained. W. That's right. B. Okay. So what you're saying, then, is that there's a long-term plan which is being decided quite a while ago to set up the situation, to set up the chessboard, the global chessboard, so that there will be a war with China. This is what you're saying. W. Yes, in a nutshell. You've got it. It's a whole series of events, and a lot of them have been realized. And again, I can only emphasize that time seems to be critical. B. What has happened, and what is yet to happen, and what is the eventual rollout plan that they want to happen if everything that they wanted were to occur? W. Well, the plan is for the fuse to be set off in the Middle East again, in a way that would make the previous conflicts in the Middle East look like playground scraps. It will involve the use of nuclear weapons and, again, it's to create an atmosphere of chaos and extreme fear, not just in the West but throughout the world, and to put in place what I've mentioned as unified totalitarian Western governments. And to do this, China needs to be taken out, politically and socially, for this to happen. B. So what they're doing here, they're killing two birds with one stone. They're using this as a justification to create what many on the internet have called the one world government, except that's not including China. You're talking about the Western nations in lockdown alliance against this new threat. W. It's specifically the Western nations, but I think we have also got to include Japan in this too. B. And how about Russia? Where does Russia stand? W. I believe Russia is a player, but I've got no evidence. For some reason or other, Russia really doesn't get a look in here. And it's just an assumption of mine that the Russian government that's in place at the moment is hand in hand with the controlling players that are here in the West. B. HM. So you're saying that because in this meeting that you attended, Russia wasn't mentioned as a major factor? W. No, none at all. The only way it was mentioned is that the whole idea is to create a condition of chaos throughout the world. It would mean the later use of biological weapons, widespread food shortages, which will affect vulnerable countries across the globe, followed by mass starvation and disease. There was talk about biological agents being used against China, described as being flu-like, and it would spread like wildfire. 4. Now, they didn't mention it at this meeting, But I know now that it will attack people genetically, not everybody together. How that would happen, I'm not a geneticist, I really don't know. One can only assume that it's linked to DNA in some way. B. MMHM. W. And the differences that are found in DNA. These differences have been identified and the viruses can be made that could kill a person off and do it quite quickly. B. And so the viruses are genetically targeted is what you're saying. W. Yes. B. Genetically targeted for racial type, or more specific even than that. W. Racial type. I can be quite definite on that. They're talking about extinction of a whole part of the human race, doing so genetically. B. Really? Did they mention that in this meeting, in those terms? W. Not exactly. Those are my terms. But this is how it was mentioned, and this is my recall of it and how this came out and how I've interpreted it. B. Okay. W. But that's what it most definitely alluded to. B. Are they talking about getting the Chinese out of the way because they're an inconvenient major group that's not playing ball with the global plans? Or are they talking about this as an excuse to thin down the entire world's population, including that in the Western countries? W. Well, it's a very good question and as far as I can see, it's a hypothetical one. Again, I can't give you an answer to that one. From a personal point of view, it definitely appears to be a thinning of the world's population and it's getting it down into a controllable size for this government that's going to come, in order for them to have the control that they wish for. Otherwise, they wouldn't have it. It even sickens me to speak about this now, it really does. It sickens me no end that they would go ahead and do this sort of thing. That such things have actually been spoken about. They're bringing the population down to what they coldly believe to be a manageable level. B. Can you reference in this meeting that you attended to those levels, or the numbers, or the percentages, or anything tangible that you can remember? W. Yes. They're talking about half. B. Wow. That's a lot of people. W. Yes. It is. B. Okay. W. That's bringing it back down by half. B. So that's more than the Chinese, then. That answers the question, doesn't it? W. Well, in a nuclear exchange, and I believe there will be a limited nuclear exchange, there will be some sort of ceasefire. That was spoken about. They anticipated a quick ceasefire, but not before millions had already died, principally in the Middle East. So they're probably talking about Israel here, the population in Israel being sacrificed. Also places like Syria, Lebanon, possibly Iraq, definitely Iran, you know, the towns and major cities, power plants and so forth, that sort of thing. And then a ceasefire before it goes full out. B. A cease? Wow. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, I do apologize. A ceasefire before it goes full out. W. Yes, it's like some sort of game of poker where they already know what hands are going to be dealt. They know what's going to be dealt. They know that scenario could be brought about and that scenario can be ended again with the ceasefire. So we'll have the ceasefire, and it's during this time of the ceasefire that events will start to really take off. B. Do you know how? W. Yes. This is when biological weapons will be used. B. O. W. This will create the conditions where biological weapons can be used. And here you have got to imagine a world, now post-nuclear war, or limited nuclear war, in chaos, financial collapse, totalitarian governments coming into place. B. And a lot of damage to infrastructure. W. People living in total fear and panic. This is what's going to happen next. You'll have a scenario, and this again was talked about, and I can go into some detail about how people will become more controllable with no one coming out in contention about what's going to happen because their own safety and security has now been placed firmly in the hands of those who are saying they can protect it best. And it's in this ensuing